Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here today. I'm going to talk to you today about two things. One, my research in robotic dexterity in the Assistive Robotics and Manipulation Laboratory. But I also want to kind of start off, particularly being at this conference, talking about some of the outreach work that I participate in Black and robotics, trying to increase the participation of Black and underrepresented minorities in the space of robotics. So in 2020, after the death of George Floyd, I and a few of my colleagues, we were thinking, what can we do in our space to really improve the presence of Black individuals in robotics? And we wanted to start a nonprofit that would actually just make it easier to see more people that look like us in our space, kind of what this conference here is doing, and provide opportunities for our people. And so we founded Black in Robotics, established around three principles: community, advocacy, and accountability. And we do that by providing networking and mentorship, creating job opportunities, education and outreach, helping others see our research for citing, accountability and advocacy. I'll mention that working with industry partners, saying how can you actually increase the presence of underrepresented minorities in your organizations, and engaging with allies to accomplish this. This is the current National Board of Directors. We have so many all-stars like Professor Ayanna Howard. She's our president, and she's also, her day job, the Dean of Ohio State University, and many others that dedicate their time through volunteer to make this happen. We do a lot of things in networking, so at a lot of the robotics conferences, we actually host sessions in those times. There's food, there's network. You get to see people who look like you, even in a really big conference, and know that you're not alone, and excellence, Black excellence is here. We also have a few chapters, like there's a Boston chapter that meets not only for socials, but also we engage with local industry companies like Boston Dynamics, others, to see what's going on and to help network, potentially leading to job opportunities for our members. And in the Bay Area, we also have a chapter, and here's a visit to Toyota Research Institute, who's one of our very active partners, also engaging and increasing the presence of Black and URM within their organization. To help create these job opportunities, we also made a networking tool called the Resume Book. So members can actually list what they're good at in robotics, and we can bring in the industry partners, and they can actually look for people with particular skills, and that can actually help with the job placements and matching. And we do summer workshops where we can actually engage, even in the middle of the pandemic. We can engage with people online. We buy robotics kits, send it to kids' homes, young adults' homes who want to learn about robotics, and this gives them an opportunity to engage and lowers that barrier for entry. We also provide scholarship opportunities, so for travel awards, if our members get into conferences, but maybe it's hard to travel, we provide up to $2,000 in travel awards that comes from our industry partners doing this, and this is those that we've serviced to date. And then recently, in the last year and a half, we also moved to providing graduate research fellowships, so these range anywhere from $5,000 to $25,000 to help pay for masters and PhDs for roboticists. So transitioning to my day job in the ARM lab, this is my lab. We have many amazing students that work, both PhDs, postdocs, master's students, and undergraduate students. Broadly speaking, in terms of what we are thinking about, we're thinking about what does it mean to have robots effectively working around people? And a big piece of that is both, how can we actually ascertain what a person needs? Sometimes that's explicit language the person can tell you, and you can use language models for that. But other times there's implicit cues, and if you have a person that's working with you as a caretaker or even as a partner, let's say imagine in a moving task, you don't always have to be very verbally explicit about what you need. We can kind of pick up cues from each other. What does it mean to give robots those types of abilities? The second side of our lab says, well, it's great to have that ability to interact with a person like that, but you need to be capable in the first place. If you can't actually do anything that's useful, then it's really just a friend. You can't actually have it do anything that's really useful. So those are the two sides that my lab is focusing on. And today I'm going to really focus on that capability side. What does it mean to give robots useful abilities in the spaces designed for humans? So if we look at this, there's been a lot of work over the past few decades in robotic manipulation. You see examples here like the digit robot. This is like an articulated hand, the shadow hand. And a lot of these at first sight kind of look pretty impressive, and rightly so. However, if I were to say, well, are we ready for these robots to actually exist in your home to do the tasks you care about? You already kind of have a hint, no, and you really can't buy them. But I would ask you, like, let's really think about reasons why. Why isn't it ready to be in your home yet? If you kind of look closely at these videos, it kind of pops out. In this video, you have this system that can walk around. Maybe it's not the perfect walking system, but it's pretty stable, it's pretty good. But when it comes to picking things up, the hands are actually nubs, and it just grabs things from the side. And if you need to do something articulated, it can't do it. If you think about this top one with the hand that was actually solving the Rubik's Cube with one hand, that seemed pretty impressive. But if you actually look behind the curtain, there's actually cameras looking at this Rubik's Cube from all different angles. And when you go, can I take that reinforcement learning strategy and apply it to a new task? It breaks down really quickly. Not to mention, again, if I asked it to just button up this jacket, that hand still has a lot of trouble doing that. And a lot of that is that tactile sensation, which I'll get into in a moment. And another question is, well, do we just need data? If I just had tons of data and I could do it at this problem, would I be able to accomplish these types of tasks? That also is a challenge. And Google was the first that was able to ask this question. They got like 100 of these robotic arms, and they go, well, can you solve this simple pick and place task? And yes, while they were successful on these tasks, transference, again, to new skills didn't quite work. And there was a question also of, is it just the fact that, was there enough data? Was it the hand? Was it the skill set? What is that domain? But however it was, we weren't able to quite climb over that challenge. And if you actually look at a lot of existing industrial solutions, like maybe Amazon or others, where you have to do packing, suction cups are great. You just, use a suction cup to pick up a package, place it from one location to another. But over 30% of their inventory can't be picked up with suction cups. So if you're trying to scale up your centers and you can't handle more than 30% of your inventory, there's this huge deficit that you're dealing with. So when we also think about robots in the home, some of you may have seen Roombas before. You've heard of Roombas. They're great for vacuuming. They're very practical, and they were very successful, I would say, in terms of really showing that a robot can be useful in a human's space. More recently, this is the Amazon Astro robot. It doesn't have any hands, but it has a very cute face. And it can do communication and connection, and it can monitor home and provide some security from the standpoint of like, I see you, and that's it. But there's this commercial that they actually put out, which I love to harp on. I love Amazon, but I love to harp on this. For the Amazon Astro, they were like showing all the use cases that this was good for. This guy sends a beer to his wife in the living room. But then there was one where this couple, they were sitting on a park bench, and one leans over to the other and goes, did you turn off the stove? And he was like, I did. I promise you I turned off the stove. He was like, I think we need to go back. I think you didn't turn off the stove. He's like, wait, you know what? Astro's at home. Let me go check. So he logs into the Astro, and he drives it into the kitchen, and then the Astro scans the stove, and he goes, see? But I like to point out, if the stove were on, they just have a timer. Get up and run. The Astro's just gonna sit there and watch the house burn down, right? So what does it mean to actually have a system that can do something useful, not simply observe? So even when we even look at the cartoons, the Jetsons, if you look at, if you're a Star Trek fan, we always kind of had in our back of the mind, we wanted this system that could at least do the things we could do, maybe even more, right? So what does it mean to have a robotic system in this space that's capable of doing the tasks we really wanted to do, the chores we really don't want to do? So to climb over this hill, I think we really need to start by thinking about manipulation. What can robotic hands do, and what do we need them to do? So I'll start off first just giving credit to all my students and showing that it really takes a village to make these things happen. There's a whole group of students that have been dedicated in my lab to thinking about redesigning robotic fingers, some that are thinking about tactile sensing that can even be worn by gloves by humans, others that are thinking about redesigning the hands, even others that are thinking about how do we train these hands to do complex manipulation tasks like manipulating fruit and other things, and how do we encode these with diffusion models so that we can learn from people? How do we actually attach these systems to people or have wearables that allow a person to interface with these systems? So I'll mention some of these works in more detail. The fingertip space we'll be talking about is DensTact. I won't go deep into this, but we have outcoming work in induction tactile sensing, gripper hand design, diffusion manipulation learning, JPARS, some upcoming work of ours, and human-robot teleoperation and prosthesis. So, when does tactile sensing really make a difference? I would argue it does when there's key information in your sense of contact that cannot be detected simply through vision or proprioception, knowing where your hand is. Some really simple examples is like, how do I manipulate very soft objects? Or if I'm dealing with very tiny objects like screws that are in between your fingers, maybe I need to be able to detect what I'm holding between my fingers successfully. If we take some inspiration from biology, human hands are extremely soft. They're really good at detecting the shapes of objects they're interacting with, and they can also detect forces and stresses on the surface of the finger. If I think about what does it take to untie a knot, you can't always see a knot that's between your hand, and you need to feel where multiple threads are between your fingers and the forces that are on every single thread to untie that knot. And we do this very easily. So what does it mean to create a robotic finger that has these types of capabilities? That robotic finger would need to have high resolution. It would need to know what's going on that surface with high resolution, high sensitivity. It should be reliable, easy to use, compact, and inexpensive because it's just a component of a bigger robot. So I'm going to talk about our work in DensTact, and I'm going to start off with the basic principle of how this particular type of sensor, optical tactile sensor, works. So inside of our sensor, you have a camera, you have LEDs, you have an extremely soft silicone gel that's transparent on the inside, but the boundary layer is actually reflective with a pattern, and when I deform this outside, which is very soft, I can use that camera to track that deformation, and that can reveal information to me about the shape of the surface of the sensor and ultimately the forces on the surface as well. The basic working principle is light doesn't really, for our version of the sensor, get out or in. Light that's inside stays inside, light that's outside stays outside. If I have an LED and a camera that are static relative to each other, that LED illuminates the interior, it bounces off of the surface, passing through the clear gel and back into the camera. If the surface is normal to the camera and light source, it's going to be very bright. If it's pointed away, it becomes pretty dim. And I can actually use that dimness or light intensity to actually help me have an understanding of the surface normal everywhere on the sensor. And if I were to do this more analytically, I could use Poisson integration, knowing boundary conditions, to integrate and tell me where the surface of my sensor is. But that's a lot of work, and if there's uncertainty in my actual intensity measurement, because it's still a camera sensor, I'm not going to be able to actually connect those boundary conditions in a simple Poisson integration. And so our approach to this was to actually use a neural network to perform that integration for us. The second point I'll outline is if you don't have any pattern inside of your sensor, if you were to undergo pure shear, that surface normal is actually not going to change. And you might want to track those types of forces as well. So you need to pattern the inside of your sensor, and then the question becomes, what kind of pattern do you want to use? If your sensor is very rigid, dots are totally fine because they won't really move that much. You can just track them with optical flow. But if you actually want to have very extreme deformation, because you want to be soft, because you want to handle soft things, you want to be able to do delicate tasks, then a lot of deformation is possible, and you don't want to have aliasing, where points shift, and then if you haven't kept track over time of where they've gone, you potentially don't know where they are. So you can actually create a very interesting pattern, and if you know its original shape, imagine like a sine function that you stretch, you can actually use that final shape and knowledge of the initial shape to tell you about that extreme deformation of a soft material. So again, here's the exploded view of our sensor. This is the network that performs the Poisson integration. So given this input image and deflected image, you can actually extract at the megapixel resolution at 0.31 millimeters per pixel the accurate location of every point inside of that sensor. So it's calibrated. And with a slight adjustment using the encoder part of this network, you can also get the net wrench over this entire finger. So what's the fx, yz, tau x, yz? Now this is great. It can give you some shape, and I'll show you some applications that we can do with this, but we're not done, and I'll tell you why in a moment. So this is the process of calibrating the system. Because it's so soft, we needed to know where every point on the surface was when we deformed it. So we deform into this sensor. We know with these indenters that we 3D printed where every point is, and we can use that to provide the supervised feedback to our network. So this video shows how we also collect and train the net wrench. So this is an ATI sensor, which gives you that net FXYZ, tau XYZ. This is your input image. This is the net wrench that comes out, and you can use this to also train that network. So when it's ready to use, this is what it looks like. So this is the input image. I'm pushing with this robot arm, and I'm able to actually see both the measured forces as well as the ground truth, and same setup, just passing it through a slightly different model. I can take that input image, and that can give me the high resolution calibrated shape sensing as well. And so this is the accuracy, 0.36 millimeters L1 error, so absolute error between where we said the pixel was and where it should be, 0.41 newtons, 0.387 Newton millimeters for torque. And if you collect this on the very first sensor, it actually is going to be 50,000 data sets, but with using transfer learning, you can actually accelerate this a lot. I'll speed up and talk about how we're actually able to get stress fields over your sensor as well, so we can actually get the tau X, Y, Z, and torsion over our sensor with this system. And so let me get into what we can actually do with these systems. So last thing I'll mention in this space is how we're actually shrinking this sensor down. So this version of our sensor costs about $40, and we want to actually make this very accessible on these systems. So let's get into applications. So with this type of sensor, using a ResNet, I can actually understand which screws or items I'm holding between my hand, and I can perform screw sorting by pushing in, squeezing, and detecting and determining what I'm holding. I can also use this type of sensor to do really complex grasp tasks like tap grasping, or even using a fingernail to actually pick up flat items like coins off of a surface. So I'll let that play, and then I'll speed up. So here, just really quickly see this coin. And this has been a really challenging task for many years. We can even do paper clips and things like that. Some other applications, even in the fruit space, I can actually use that sensor to actually understand and delicately manipulate fruit within an environment. And so using DenseTac, we can actually grasp with a lot of delicate effort the fruit in our environment, and we also use tools in machine learning, particularly Gaussian splats, to actually characterize damage on fruit. And so this is some work that'll be coming out of our lab very shortly, and showing that with DenseTac we can manage not to damage the fruit in our scene. We can use our fingertips to even grasp very small things like this cloth, very soft things, and actually classify how many layers are between our hands. Some other applications are even like exploring objects. So using, again, that Gaussian splat technique, we can actually use the sense of touch and vision combined together to actually build hyper-realistic views, both visual and depth, of items in our scenes, and particularly items that are hard to actually recognize if they're very dark, reflective, or transparent. We can correctly classify where they are, and we can also use this type of tool with uncertainty, depth uncertainty, to say, where should I touch next, in order to actually build the best model of my system with a few amount of touches as possible. Changing gears a little bit, we also realized that we could actually use these types of tools to accelerate how a person might actually interact with things in their environment. So jumping ahead here, my student Aaliyah, she's actually using augmented reality to drive and teach this robot on how to perform these types of tasks. So this is blending into that human interface. And my student Shivani, she's also looking at how we can actually use these types of tools to get intent from the person. Where are they looking? Can we understand, given task knowledge, how to accelerate a person's effort and understand their underlying intent? And we can even use language and these other tools to interact with our robot to say, if I want to perform a task, I can ask you to do it. I can use splats to model my environment, and then the robot can actually leverage language as well as semantics in those splats to perform these complex tasks. The last projects I'll mention real quick are how we can improve the ability of the arm to get into really difficult spots. So this is JParse, a work that we'll be actually putting on archive next week. It's been really hard for decades to bring robots into singular poses like this, and we're able to accomplish this task quite easily. And if you were to apply this in control techniques, this is a traditional control. Both of these are being driven by a joystick, If you use out-of-the-box control to try and move this to an item that's on the boundary of the workspace, it's gonna slam and stop because this is near singular pose. But with our algorithm that's also a closed form controller, we can actually go into and out of those singularities with ease because singularities become unstable points. And in the floating digits of our sensor, that doesn't stop us and we can reach that. So finally, wrapping up, what's next? We want to give more tactile sensation to our fingertips. We want to know vibration, temperature sensing. We want to be able to do all the really hard tasks that people are kind of avoiding, and so far it's kind of gimmicky. What do we really want to do to actually make these viable resources? Our robots need to be able to tie knots, zip things up, handle tools. This would be success. And then we want to collect this information from people. If I can have you wear a set of glasses, if I know where your fingers are, if I can know what you're sensing, can I replicate this on this system? So I'll end here and acknowledge all of our funding resources. Thank you very much.